Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your host and marketing manager, Mackenzie, and tonight we are diving back into the Broadway HD canon, and we are doing the play Indecent by Paula Vogel. Vogel? Yeah, we'll go with that. And the play is about the controversy surrounding the play God of Vengeance by Sholem Ash, right? Is that the name right? Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, which was a play that was produced in 1923, and for which the producer and the cast were arrested and convicted on the grounds of obscenity. This production was first performed off Broadway in 2015, and then it made it to Broadway in 2017, and was recorded for film prior to, where is it here? Just going through all my notes I did about the production history because it's interesting. Right, so it was filmed for television on August 3rd, 2017, and was released in January 2018. And yeah, I mean, fun fact is this recording actually replaced the scheduled recording of Prince of Broadway in 2018. So originally, Prince of Broadway was supposed to do a premiere in January 2018, but they pushed it for this. So
that is a fun fact.
There you go. But tonight with me, we have a fantastic group. First off, returning to our review is Mr. Max Ackerman. Hello, Max.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming back for another great episode, we hope. Fingers crossed. I know. But tonight, Max, what is in your cup? And please tell us about that beautiful sweater you're wearing, because it is stunning.
Thank you very much. Tonight in my cup is Fresca, for any fans of the boys. I just got on the Fresca train. I'm a huge Fresca fan. I want to point out this mug. Thank you very much. This mug that my dad got me. He's big into making mugs now. And then this sweater, for those of you who are fans of Seth Rogen, is a replica of Seth Rogen's sweater from the movie The Night Before, which is about three friends that celebrate Christmas together. Seth Rogen obviously plays a Jewish character, and this is his Jewish Christmas sweater. I thought it was appropriate because we are discussing a very Jewish play today. And if you couldn't tell by the rest of me, I'm one of them.
Love that. We also have returning to our review after her fantastic inaugural duet review that she just did with Ryan about the play Crave. We have Miss Aisling Murphy. Hello, Aisling.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing well. I see it's a change in background this time from your first two appearances.
It is, yeah. My job didn't really like that I was doing this at my desk at work, so we're now in my bedroom. Welcome.
Lovely. Welcome. This is my childhood bedroom that I'm in tonight. So
nice.
There we go. We're all in our bedrooms. Except for maybe Max.
No, I am, and you can see my bed back there.
Very good. There we go. True Zoom theater right here. All taking place in the bedroom. Perfect.
Totally.
And Ashley, what's in your cup today?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a day. So today I have hot chocolate with a scoop of vanilla Haagen-Dazs in it. It's quite enjoyable.
What is that mug shaped like?
It's a polar bear.
Oh,
nice.
Well done. Well done. And last but certainly not least, we have our literary manager, resident dramaturg, my co-producer of all things The Cup, Mr. Ryan Barakovich. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Mac. Always a pleasure.
Yes. Welcome. What's in your cup tonight?
Well, tonight I'm drinking water, but I am drinking it out of this authentic Kiddush cup that I got as a bar mitzvah present. I don't even remember how many years ago, because I don't have a sweater to communicate this aspect of my own personal identity, so I made a point of channeling it into my cup.
A Kiddush cup is not just better, but probably far more authentic. Very much more genuine.
Yeah, but it is not filled with Monashevitz because Monashevitz is gross. So just water for me tonight.
That's true.
Wonderful. And tonight I am drinking just a glass of the Sea Breeze cranberry lemonade because why not? I'm at home tonight. I can shake it up. But there we go. That is our panel. That's what's in our cup. And now we're going to dive into this play. So first off, we're switching up our first question a bit because this is really an ensemble piece. There's no real like lead character. It's an amalgamation of a fantastic group of performers. So, what were your thoughts on the ensemble cast? Did any performer or character in particular stand out to you? And Max, will let you lead this one.
I mean, yes. There were a number of really excellent performances, but I think I'm going to actively choose not to single anyone out because it really is like you said, it's a fantastic ensemble performance. Mm-hmm. I mean, this like I'm generally a fairly harsh critic of theater and especially of Jewish theater, but this play, it really blew me away, the talent across the board. And I think that's also really that was deeply intentional because there is that sort of it really gives it that communal aspect, that sort of feeling like you're watching people come together to tell a story that has been given to them, that's been told to them, and that it's the storytelling is more of a responsibility that the actors have to the audience as opposed to and it is a responsibility to be told as opposed to like a sort of personal tour. There's just no ego in the production, which I think is great, especially in a production about some really massive egos.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very true. Well said, Max. Well said. Aisling, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So while I do agree that the ensemble as a whole is super, super strong, no weak links, et cetera, I do want to single out Richard Topol as Lemel. Sorry, I just have my list of names handy. He's so aggressively likable for the entire play. He's endearing when he needs to be and very sympathetic to watch as well. There was never a point when I wasn't on his side and just actively yearning for things to be okay. And he, especially in just his face was so expressive and so just really good. Just there was a craft to it and just a likability to it that I really appreciated. And yeah.
Wonderful. Ryan, your thoughts?
So, yeah, I'm going to concur with the comments that have been made so far. Not a weak link, yada, yada. But instead of singling out someone in particular, something I'd like to remark upon is the double casting in this play, the way they've actually made use of the ensemble and the repetitions of which performers came up where. Just for those who have not read this play, I have my U of T library copy of it right here that I will eventually give back when COVID's over, I guess. But yeah, it's not actually, the double casting is not baked into the text itself. This is the premiere production, so this gives us an approximation of what the creators probably envisioned with the double casting, but I think there is room for creativity and different approaches in the ways that could be handled in future productions. But I thought the way they did it here was spot on. Like every character, even when like different actors within the play were playing the role of Rivkala or Amenka, it was always the same actor playing that role in like the actual like production of Indecent. And another one that I thought was fantastic is the actor playing Shalom Ash. Max Gordon Moore plays Eugene O'Neill, which I just thought what a wonderful scene that was. That's probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing for sure. And then when he comes back as John Rosen at the end, it's very much that past former optimistic version of Ash trying to talk to the old curmudgeon-y cynical version of him to reinvigorate this play and bring it back into the world. So I thought that was just stunning. But my absolute favorite probably moment in the entire play, and it was because of the double casting, was Stephen Rattazzi. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He played a lot of the minor characters, but he played the police officer, Officer Bailey, who comes in to interrupt the performance. And then immediately after, he was a Rabbi Silverman, who goes on to sermonize about how awful this play is and why he was the one who called the police. And just what a moment of having like the same actor take on both of those roles. It shows very much that this rabbi, the community rallying against the play, is just as harmful, if not more, than the police itself who actually come to shut it down. And I imagine that's something we will talk about more when we get to the later question, so I'll leave it at that. But the casting was amazing, and obviously, Lemel was one of the great characters, the only one who wasn't double casted, and I think that was a wise choice to let him just be his own presence in there on the periphery.
Yes. And he also, I mean, the stage manager character, it's right off the top, it gives you a very, distinct parallel to something like Our Town, like a very traditional thing where he does become that everyman character, but the only difference is that in this play, the everyman character is a Jewish guy from Shtetl.
And like he's just so amazed by this is theater, it's wonderful. Like he you couldn't ask for a better audience surrogate to really just get swept up into the wonder of this world and really remember how amazing it is to see theater for the first time and be blown away by the magic of it.
I will say that at that point I got very verklempt about not being able to see this in real life. Like, this is a show that kind of demands being seen.
Well, not fun fact about that, but I had tickets to see this because it was coming to Mirvish in May.
No kidding.
And I had tickets, and of course, May 2020. But Mirvish gave me my, credit, I guess. But I really wanted to see this live, so I made a point of getting it on the docket for the Cup because when I saw Broadway HD had it, I'm like, we're watching this, all of us.
It's true. Ryan has been championing this piece on the docket for quite a while. So, and it was a total good thing to champion because this we'll get into more about the production, but a good piece of work to champion, Ryan. A very good piece of work to champion. Yes. Okay. For me, once again, fantastic ensemble. Praise, because just watch how in sync they are. You don't get to that level of being so in tune with each other to know when to give time in a pause and when to jump really fast without actually being actively listening, as well as just knowing your cast well enough to know when I need to do this. And the fact that also a lot of this is underscored as well just adds that extra element of every night you got to be extra on your toes, especially the band, because if an actor pauses somewhere, that can now potentially throw off the underscore. So the fact that everybody has to be so in tune is just incredible. And I think that's one of the reasons why we rarely ever see a play with musical underscores, because how can you every night hit those same stings in the music that you need to without making it really formulaic? So well done.
You bring up a good point that the musicians are part of the cast with this. Yes. Like, it's not just accompaniment, they are part of the drama.
They are so part of the drama. They're all intertwined. I actually have two shout outs for this. First up is Miss Katrina Lenkin, who many people will know for her Tony Award-winning performance in The Band's Visit. She was also just on Broadway performing the role of female Bobby in the musical Company by Sondheim with Patti LuPone. But she was just phenomenal in this, I just have to say. Like, the fact that she was just doing so much on stage, whether it was performing a love scene, intertwiningly performing a violin while, like, wrapped around or going through somebody else's legs. Like, just go watch her violin performance of If I Were a Rich Man that she did for a miscast night on Broadway. It's a really great reinterpretation of that song where she plays the violin and sings that song. So look it up. Fantastic. But my other big shout out is for performer Tom Nealis. First off, just for that magnificent beard that he has. Like, that is like
truly magnificent.
Luscious.
It's a truly magnificent beard. I wish I could have a beard that good. But like it's a beautiful beard. But also just the fact that like he just commanded the stage. Like, no matter where he was, I had to watch him, whether he was singing, dancing, just playing a guy in a fur coat. Like, for some reason, he was just such a grounded gravitas of a character of all his characters that he was just able to draw your eye to them. So you always were wanting to see what he does. And he was always just that great elderly presence on stage that it was just phenomenal. He just really drew my eye throughout the entire piece.
And I totally agree with you. And he is like, he's a really phenomenal actor, and I think I agree with you. There's a great groundedness to him, but I think also what gives him such facility and versatility with his characters that he has an unbelievable control of his body. I think that just where he centers himself, and I mean, we have very brief moments of him doing dance and movement, and he moves so gracefully that you can really see very specifically that this is a movement guy. Like it's, you know, you can sometimes tell with actors, you know, what school of thought and I think that it's safe to say this guy really centers himself in his movement training, and there can come such power from that when you have such knowledge of your sort of how everything works. And I just think it's a hard thing to do, and very impressive. I agree.
Go Ryan, go.
No, I was just gonna say he really shows off that movement in like the cabaret scenes, for example, where he really like in most of the play, even when he's like acting as Schildekraut as like the main role that he takes on through most of it, he's, you know, acting like an actor in a way, which shows off movement in a very subtle way, but then he gets to really show it off bombastically in big feather boa headdresses in the cabaret scene. I also thought just the role of Schildekraut, that was kind of his main, if you had to pick one character for each of them, would be his. Like, it going back to what Mac you said about just this commanding presence he has, I think it's very, you feel like, okay, this is a famous actor who would wow the European stages, like all across Europe, and you really like feel that connection between the actor and the role there.
Yes,
so good, well shouted out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the key moment for me that really kind of sealed my shout out for him was when they're all in line at the end. After the attic performance and they've been caught by the Nazis, and they're all in line, and he's actually at the back of the line, so you're not really getting a lot of focus on him, but you can see him in the background, and just the authentic, haunting expression on his face. That is such a lived facial expression. It's not acted like, okay, I gotta act like I am marching to my death. Like, there's just something so authentic about that worn face that he had in that moment. It was just, it stuck with me. I was watching it last night. It stuck with me after I turned it off, and I went, yeah, that face is still like seared in there. Like, it is a face that I will not forget. Yeah. So just Tom Nealis, bravo to you, good sir, bravo, and bravo to the entire cast. I mean, as
in case we didn't shout you all out enough.
Exactly.
In case you're watching.
Yeah,
I hope you watch. I mean, if you don't, it's okay. But if you do watch, thank you for watching. All right, let's dive in now to what was your favorite production or design element of this piece. Aisling, I'll let you start.
Sure. I am going to say two, just because they both impacted the show pretty equally, I would say. Klezmer music is a character itself within the play, in just this really gorgeous way. It's not really like overshadowing at any point, and at no point did I really feel like, yes, this here is the Klezmer music for the Jewish show. Yeehaw. It just felt very natural and felt like part of the storytelling in a way that I think needed to be there. Like, I don't think you can really separate Indecent from its music, which I think is really cool when that happens, when they both feed each other so well. And my other one as well, perhaps might be stealing someone's, I'm so sorry. Just the use of ashes and the use of the dust, both in the beginning and the end, and how, like, the repetition of that. Mine. I'm so sorry,
Stole one of mine.
It's okay. But I'll piggyback right off of you, because
Perfect.
I had the klezmer music, because that is just such an important part of the show, and who doesn't love a good klezmer ditty?
Absolutely.
And I think it really brings you back to that old Eastern European feel. It's not just like, oh yes, Jews, you see. It's really
Jews, the show.
but it is a huge part of sweeping you into the world of the show, and I agree the way you put it perfectly, that it is a character in and of itself. And I'll add to the ashes and the dust, because what I was gonna say on that point is that it's just beautiful stage imagery, of which that is one of them. The other one that to me really stands out is the rain at the very end. We've heard about this rain so many times throughout the production, and we kind of aren't expecting to see it in a way, because through the magic of theater, like Max, when you were on our Red episode previously, you stood in defense of running water on stage, and what's better than running water? Actual rain falling down for the characters to dance in and express their love. And in that moment, I really feel like, you know, that was a big point of contention throughout the censorship and editing of God of Vengeance is, ooh, you cut the rain scene that's so important to build that love. And getting back to the sense of community, Max, that you brought up earlier, like, I think the fact that it's not just the love between the two women that are dancing in the rain at the end, but the entire ensemble on stage together in that very moment, old Ash, young Ash, everyone else. It is just like, what an image to end on. So
that's... Sure. And I think as well, like that part is also, you know, Paula Vogel's reverence for God of Vengeance itself. Like, I feel like that's such an act of love between both her and the director as well, just kind of celebrating this play as well. And that moment really wraps up that celebration really nicely in a quite cathartic way, which is always good.
I'm glad you brought up the director. So Rebecca Taichman, who directed this, co-created the piece with Vogel. Vogel kind of wrote the final script version of it, which is why it gets like playwright credit there. But this was like a long collaboration between the two of them. Taichman did like graduate level research with like I believe it was a practice-based research project where it was like a verbatim piece staged of the trial, and then contacted Vogel, and the two of them started working on how do we take this further. And Vogel's idea was, well, I think this story is bigger than the obscenity trial. And so, yeah, definitely, I'm glad you shouted out the director while we're complimenting these great stage tableaus. That, yes, the directing is very much an act of, well, very deliberate authorship in this play, just as much as Vogel's, even if it's a less famous name. So, Rebecca Taichman, thank you.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan, because I was actually going to say I have a tremendous amount of respect for Rebecca Taichman. She's a wonderful director, and I think won the Tony for this production.
I can tell you.
Is that true?
I can tell you, yes. She won the Tony, but it did not win Best Play. It also won for Best Design.
Well, I mean, like that is, but for that reason that she and Vogel worked so closely on the creation of this play, the play itself, like it's hard to separate production element from, you know, the play itself. And I mean, like, I totally echo everything you guys have said. I think that the sand and the dust was a beautiful image, especially in contrast to the sort of concentration camps at the end of the play, and very moving piece there. I think I love klezmer music, and anytime it's used anywhere, it's great. Mandy Patinkin, I might have mentioned this in our last Cup. I try and mention this album all the time. Mandy Patinkin has an incredible album called Mama Lotion, which is an album of like American songbook type songs done in Yiddish, which is and done through sort of the klezmer style, in which he really uses it to highlight how deeply, and people don't realize this, but how deeply klezmer music informed musical theater and informed the American songbook. You know, we get that moment of Oklahoma, obviously written by two Jews, and you know, all of this to say, so yes, klezmer music is beautiful. I love the klezmer music in this play. Klezmer music always makes me feel like warm and like I want to dance, and it's just like the most beautiful. I think it's a wonderful kind of music. But all of that to be said, I think that actually the most beautiful part of this production is the use of the Yiddish language, and the reverence for not just the language but the Yiddish culture and Yiddish theater. Because there's such a storied and deep history of Yiddish theater that is unbeknownst to, I would say, about 95% of, you know, the general theater going audiences, and the way that the performances of these actors as the original actors echoes those traditions and those styles. I watched this with my roommate, and I kept mentioning the Dybbuk, the original film version of the Dybbuk from like 1918 or something. Like it's like old black and white pantomime, and it's all these crazy like faces, but it's just so like, I mean, whether you like the movie or not, like there's just such a tradition to it that I think is so important, and that really I think shines through the most when they are actually speaking the Yiddish language. And all that to be said, I think the way it shines the most beautifully is actually when they're speaking Yiddish but actually speaking English. When they have their surtitles that say in English or in Yiddish, and when they're speaking in English, they have these heavy Eastern European accents, and when they're speaking in Yiddish, they speak, in their American accents. And I found it very funny because having not seen this play, had an idea and was workshopping an idea to do King Lear with the exact same concept to have it be a Yiddishkeit family. Yeah. I hope I'm allowed to say that on here.
You did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, go for it.
It's not as anyway.
You're allowed. No one else.
Yeah, exactly. I can't say it. You can.
But yeah, I thought that the attention to language in this play and to the different languages that are represented, because it's not just Yiddish and English, obviously, as well, was just really got a sense of the notes of the play, the words being the notes of the play, and together they compose this incredible melody. I just thought it was beautiful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, I mean, everybody's taken mine, so that's okay. But I also had language and klezmer music. So actually, fun story about Mandy Patinkin, because I gotta give one now, because I love Mandy Patinkin.
Excellent swordsman.
Yeah,
he's a fantastic swordsman. I've seen him twice in concert, once with Patti LuPone, and once he just came to Toronto and did it. But you're right, Max. Mandy Patinkin has such a reverence for klezmer music that he ended his concert where he was doing a lot of American songbook songs, but at the end, he sang a klezmer song while they were showing reels of the recent refugees, and then they intercut that with boats of Jews coming over from Eastern Europe, like authentic, like old film footage, and it all melded together, and it was gorgeous because it was like just Mandy Patinkin with a ghost light on stage in the whirring film in the background, and him just singing this beautiful, haunting piece of klezmer music that I don't know what he was singing. Like I didn't understand the words, but I understood the emotion that was going behind it, and it was gorgeous. So there's my Mandy Patinkin story. But yes, Max, I mean, you basically hit all the notes. The language, like the Yiddish language, is something that I've become more and more interested in because it all started when Fiddler on the Roof did a Yiddish version, which is...
I wanted to see it so badly.
So did I. There is an album they did of it.
Oy.
So I've listened to the album
a
bunch of times, and I just find it such a fascinating language. So the fact they were able to intertwine this, and as someone who does not speak Yiddish, who has never been brought up with Yiddish, but yet I was still able to really still mentally could understand what was going on and what was being said, even if you didn't fully get there. Because if you notice in the back, they were doing subtitles with the Yiddish, but sometimes the camera angles cut away so you couldn't actually see what the subtitle was. But I still never lost a beat. And the fact that they were able to do that for an audience who majority probably don't know Yiddish, but yet they still, it really took me no time at all to acclimate into this style of language for the show. So shout out to that. Klezmer music, fantastic. I mean, as I said, I bought the album so I could listen to it because I just love klezmer music. I mean, hearing the music actually brought me back to when I was 11 or 12, and I went to Poland with my family in the middle of March, so in the middle of a snowstorm, and we went into this little upstairs house restaurant. And sure enough, at dinner, they had a whole klezmer band playing authentic and singing authentic klezmer music. And just hearing all that music just brought me right back to that really interesting moment in time. And I mean, Max, you also brought up the fact they used Oklahoma, which I thought was just so wonderful because we just talked about it.
It's the last episode we did.
It was the last episode we did, but the fact they turned it into a minor sounding song and made it dark, and the fact that, as Max, you alluded to, the fact that the song was written by two Jews. So it's illustrating kind of the change in the way Jewish people were producing and doing theater, going from the Yiddish kind of off-Broadway style to now being hailed as the kings of Broadway, and they're doing this all-American sounding score that totally kind of deviates. So it's great.
I think it's great. Yeah, and I mean it's very indicative of the sort of the question of the play, which I know we're going to get to later, but like what do American audiences want to see of Jews, right? And the question and so yeah, I know we'll likely talk about that later, but I do also just sort of on the note of production elements want to mention something that I think we could use a lot more of here in Canada, which is there was such an appreciation for the audience that because it's a play about an audience reaction, everything in the play depended on audience reaction. And so the entire thing was done in service of the audience. There was, like I said before, there was no ego or it didn't feel like the performers. And I think that this does tie in because I don't know if it's an entirely Jewish cast. I know Vogel and I assume Rebecca Taichman are both Jewish. It does seem as if the majority of the cast, if not all, are Jewish. And I can say as a Jewish artist, we don't often get the chance to tell our story in this much honesty. Like there's only so much that, I will say Gentile audiences can take of that story, I think, still. And that is very true in Canada. And it's very true, I think, certainly in the United States. And I think that what was shown so beautifully was it's not a this is who we are and it was just like can we reach a common ground over this idea of censorship and identity? You know what I mean? That like for this, that ironically the play that was so inflammatory has become now a part of a play that actually achieves, in my opinion, almost what the original play wanted to, which is it humanizes the Jewish story to such an extent that like you just can't escape it. Like you just it doesn't. The audience is an integral part of that story working, because if the audience doesn't understand it, if the audience doesn't get it, this thing that is sort of inherently foreign, then the play falls apart. And so I think that's a testament to the actors and the production team for being able to achieve that.
Well said, Max. Well said. And now let's get into what we thought was the weakest part of the production, if there was one. Ryan, I'll let you start this one.
Yeah, so had a very hard time picking something for this because across the board, this was an amazing production. I'm going to nitpick at something. So it's not the projections themselves. I will preface this comment with that. Because I think there were a lot of great moments when projections were used very well, like we talked about in the languages, just to like illustrate, when subtitles were needed, and to even like say to indicate when the language was switching back and forth. I think after a while, this isn't the critique I'm going to make, but after a while, I think they probably could have done away with the projections for that, because once the convention is established of accent means English, no accent means Yiddish, I think we didn't need it on the screen anymore. But yeah, I think that they're helpful. Things like that. Dates are obviously important to communicate through the projections, and I think was all done well. And there were some like really beautiful projections. Like I think one of my favorites was the Judge McIntyre's verdict filling the entire stage and masking the actors. And so like I'm not judging the fact that they use projections, and even what I irked me just a bit, and again, very nitpicky, is the fact that I just felt like the projections were overused in a way, and the kind of big overusing of them that I think certainly could have been cut back on was that every single scene title was always being projected. And I get where this comes from. This is Brecht. It's, hey, Brecht did it. And, and then I think in terms of American theater in particular, this became very popular in the late 90s and early aughts with like Tectonic Theater Project. The idea that, we don't do scenes, we do moments, and, direct quote from Kaufman. But like, I don't think we always need to be told what this scene is called, and I don't always find that those add useful and or meaningful information to the scene. And maybe I will admit that the fact that we are watching this on a screen, like mediated through Broadway HD in this way, that it certainly hampered this for me more so than it might have on stage, where you can just quickly glance up and then glance back down. But we were always kind of forced to be aware of what's on the screen by virtue of when the camera chose to show it, because often the screen wasn't visible to it, and then sometimes you worry like, oh, I could see that there is something being projected, but I can't see it right now. Am I missing something important? Whereas that wouldn't be as much of a concern if you're just in the space, glance up, glance down. So not a big thing, but something about just the overuse of projections and the scene titles in particular, I thought maybe was a bit redundant.
Aisling, I see you nodding along. So is this something you agree with?
To a certain extent, yeah. Like, I had thought about it a little bit during the production, but I think a lot of my issues with the projections could be chalked up to Broadway HDs and the framing of the individual shots. We're watching it digitally, not how it was first conceived. It happens. No, I like picking a weakest thing in the show feels a little reductive a bit, but the thing that was bugging me has nothing to do with the show itself. It isn't Paula Vogel's fault. It's not the people involved's fault at all. It's a bit of an elephant in the room just for me as we're having this conversation. Have any of you seen Old Stock by Hannah Moscovich?
No.
Oh God. Okay. So you should. It's very, very similar to Indecent, to the point where I found myself wishing that I had seen Indecent first. Old Stock is very much the Canadian mirror of this show in terms of having Ben Kaplan as this very klezmery animated link between the audience and what's happening on stage. It's talking about Hannah Moskovich's Jewish genealogy and her ancestors' voyage to Canada and her just bloodlines and things. And it's such a similar show to Indecent. So I found myself while watching Indecent just constantly referencing the Moskovich in my head, which has nothing to do with Indecent or Paula Vogel. And I'm sure that they didn't, influence or echo each other purposely at any point. It was just interesting to have these kind of two, like the Americans and the Canadians talking to each other with these two remarkably similar plays, which was neat.
Okay, well, no, I was not familiar with that particular Moskovich show, but it's interesting because Moskovich isn't the Canadian Vogel. Like, if I had to
no, not at all.
Like Judith Thompson is the Canadian Paula Vogel. Let's be clear about that. But yeah, so that's that. I'm very surprised to hear that the two of them would write such similar plays. So that's interesting.
It's interesting. Definitely look it up. And like musically, stylistically, it's a very similar show.
Did that debut at Soul Pepper? I know of the show. I have never.
I've heard the title, but I haven't seen
heard the title.
It's been through Paragon a couple of times. It's 2B, and it's come through the NAC in Ottawa a few times as well. But in Toronto, I'm pretty sure it's Paragon.
Well, yeah,
I might be wrong though.
Playwright in residence there, so that makes sense.
That makes sense. Right on. I was gonna say I'm a big projections guy, and I also really love scene titles. Like that's I'm not always a huge supporter of Brecht's theory, but I do sort of like that idea of like that alienating ability that scene titles have.
I'll clarify. I'm not against that specific device. It's certainly not alienation general. I just think it's more powerful when used sparingly, and I don't think the production did that.
I dug them. Like they didn't really lose any, because I think they were varied enough. Like, I know that you guys recently talked about Othello that was just done at Stratford Festival, and I won't talk too much. Shoot. Like, I think that when varied enough and when used in consistently interesting ways, I was down for them. I would say, there were minor things for sure that irked me when in individual performances or in phrasing of lines or whatever, but like I think that the mark that distinguishes a good show from a great show is how that show and that director and those actors deal with the inherent imperfections of the theatrical medium. And I thought that by going this cabaret route, by going this sort of really deeply live route for this show, the whole team approached it in such a self-aware way that it's almost, like you said, reductive to talk about the imperfections of it, because I think that the imperfections of it are sort of the point. It's a play about a deeply imperfect play, but it's also a play about deeply imperfect people. And so in that regard, theater is the perfect medium for this, because you're never going to have a perfect play in the same way that you're never going to have a perfect person. And so I think that, like, yes, for sure, there were little things here and there, but I thought that it retained that really deeply human imperfection that kept me guessing, kept me wondering what was going to happen next, even though I basically knew the history of the story already. Like, I was excited. I was excited by it. You know what I mean?
Like, yeah, I think the imperfection is a good way of putting it, and like it like reminds me of like what Peter Brook says about rough theater, and how I think it's remarkable how they can make a Broadway production feel like you are in that attic watching this slap together makeshift community production. And
and what I think, what I want to say to that is that, I am not a historian, and I'm not even explicitly a practitioner of Jewish theater, but like, as a Jew who's deeply influenced by Jewish theater, that's what Jewish theater is. It's a story that you can tell no matter where you are, and it's the same effect, right? It's because that's the essence of our identity, is like, we don't have a place. We live in our stories. And so wherever we're so practiced at telling our stories that they can exist in any form, in any space, and they still have that human sort of holistic element to them. You know what I mean?
Maybe that's why we always wear our hats.
Exactly.
More Fiddler.
Oh, Ryan, well done. Well done. Don't worry, we'll talk more about Fiddler on the Roof. That will come up.
That's probably enough for one episode.
I don't know, Ryan. I got something still tying to that. Anyway, so I do have a part. It's not a totally weak element, but it is something that I did find a little bit weaker for me. But sometimes the character transitions weren't overly clear to me. Like not for everybody. Particularly, it was with Adina Version and her transitions, because at one point I got confused when she was playing, because she plays hold on, let me go back to my
She played all the Rivkalas, basically.
Yes, all the Rivkalas, as well as Sholom's wife. Mm-hmm. So for some reason at one point I couldn't keep all the characters straight. Like, that's the one thing I liked about Tom Nealis, was even though he was playing all these elderly statesman characters, they all still felt different enough for me that I could easily figure out, okay, he's changed to a new role. Sometimes with Adina and her roles, I was like, okay, hold on a minute here. I'm not perfectly following what's going on. So I mean, so maybe it was some of the caution, because at least I know with Tom, when he put on his fur coat, he was very much that. I forget the what's his name? Schildekraut. Yes. And
such a hilarious real life
name. Exactly. So good.
He was one of the most famous actors in Europe.
I know. No, he's brilliant. Obviously, it's just a hilarious thing.
Yeah, like Mac, to your point, like I think.
And it's not just Charlie. There are other times, like for example, when Max Gordon Moore transitions from Sholem into ensemble member in the attic scene. At first, before I fully kind of thought it through, I was like, wait a second, does Sholem go back to Europe again to like go be with Lou? And then I was like, oh wait, no, he's put on a coat, so clearly he is transitioned. But there was a moment where during the transition, and when he first showed up in that scene, I had to do a double take and go, wait a minute, hold on, what's happening? So there's a few moments like that where I was like, I would have liked a little bit of a clear job. Like it was very clear with like what Ryan, the performer you said it out. He went from Irish cop to theater producer to rabbi. Like he did a very good job at jumping from character to character, where each of his characters had their own physical posture, their own speech language. Like none of them talk the same way. So I think that's something I would have liked a little bit more from like Adina and her changing the characters. Like when she takes on the American role, what's her name?
Virginia McFadden.
Like I would have liked a little bit more in there than just like a headband. Like do a little bit more in the character to really differentiate her.
Voice was so different in like going from Verena from the Shtetl to Virginia McFadden.
Yeah. I would like a little bit more. A little bit more, but that's just me. Like sometimes
agree to disagree.
Okay, that's fair. Yes, but sometimes the character transition for me didn't always come through clear right away, so I would like that a little bit tuned up a little bit more. But overall, I mean, that's a nitpick. I mean, the fact that they're jumping for so many characters and so many scenes that it's like, great job, like frig, like if there's a few transitions that don't fully work right away and I have to do a double take, go for it. That's totally fine. Like once again, it's a nitpick. It's not like it was a glaring problem for me. Just like when we did Oklahoma and the camera angles and the way that was pro shot where there was no audience, clearly, like, yeah. So overall, nitpick.
I will say as well though that Adina Verson was pretty consistently who would pull my eye and who I was most interested to watch when she was on stage. I think any inconsistencies in her transitions or whatever were pretty mitigated by the fact that she was just wonderful to watch and really embodied these characters so well, even if the transitions between the characters wasn't the most clear at some times. Like I just found her again just so likable. The casting agents for this show did a great job, and they are the unsung heroes of Broadway casting. But
it's so funny that you should say that, because I like when she started the show as I don't know what Ash's wife's name was.
Metja, I want to say.
Metja, I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I like this actress. Like I was like, oh, I don't know. And then she kept going, and actually, to tell you the truth, the moment that sealed was when she went into the really heavy Eastern European Yiddish accent, and I was like, damn. Like, okay, cool. Like I know that person. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was a really, I thought she was fantastic. And I thought that the final rain scene is so beautiful, but like the two of them, the performances they give, it was just like so moving. Yeah, I agree with you. She was wonderful.
I mean, that's a fair nitpick there. I mean, the final rain scene is absolutely beautiful. It's perhaps foreshadowed a touch too much before it comes up, but that's okay.
The rain scene! It's the rain scene!
We as humans are sentimental, and I think that plays are allowed to reference that, but that's okay.
Perfect. All right. Okay, so now, do we think this production is worth the watching? Max, as a leader at Dandelion Theater, is this something we could potentially see programmed in the future?
How's your budget, first of all?
Ryan will come hold a watering can up on stage.
Well, for sure. I mean, like, I would put it on if I had $1 million for sure. It's an incredible production, definitely worth the watch. What I will say, as a member of as an artistic director, what it made me really want to do is God of Vengeance. Like that's the play that it made me really want to put on. The play that it reminded me how relevant and brilliant it is. And that's like that. And so to that end, I think it's a provably effective play. So I wouldn't be surprised if, in a couple of years, we did start to see a couple renewals of God of Vengeance inspired by this play, because, it's an inspiring play and it argues the case for God of Vengeance very well, which I think is truly, like, because obviously it started as a comment on the trial, and of course the trial that no one actually showed up to defend, or I'm sorry, a lot of people showed up to defend and were not permitted to.
Exactly.
It provides a really excellent defense for what in my opinion, should be regarded as a deeply influential and landmark work of theater, not just Jewish or Yiddish theater, but theater in general.
Matt, can I piggyback onto
Yes.
that? Well, it's funny you say that, Max, because I actually had the exact opposite opinion.
Really?
Well, in terms of just to rip off the Band-Aid of answering the question as posed, yes, it's worth the watch. I thought it was wonderful. Sorry I missed it live, but was glad to get to watch it in this medium. Thank you, Broadway HD. But my kind of takeaway from this, and granted, I have not read God of Vengeance and have not had an opportunity to see it because who's staging it around here? Maybe in Montreal. But, yeah, well, there you have it. But I kind of feel like I disagree with the character of John Rosen coming in at the end. Granted, he's speaking in 1957, but when he says, I wrote down the quote, that God of Vengeance has urgency of today. I want to bring it to American audiences just as you wrote it. And that got me thinking of, do I want to see God of Vengeance today in 2020 or even 2015 or 2017 when this play was written? And I think now that we have Indecent, I almost feel like we don't need to stage God of Vengeance. I think, to me, it feels like the interesting part of the story for today is the story that Indecent tells. And if we were to stage God of Vengeance today, it would very easily become museum theater. And
see, I would say, to tell you the God honest truth, and like, I don't know if this is fair or not, and I don't even know if it's even necessarily true, but I would say that now, only now, and barely now, are Gentile audiences ready for something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think genuinely, like, I think people might be able to get away with it and communicate the original intention of the play effectively without cuts in English. Like, maybe.
But I get the sense that there will be a program note or a lobby display that talks about the production and reception history of the play, and to me,
you have to.
that is, well, of course you have to, because that's what's interesting about it. And to me, if that's so much more interesting, I'd rather just watch Indecent. That is kind of my takeaway. Like, it feels kind of sad because this is like a, lost moment of theater history that Vogel and Taichman did such a great job of reviving. But now that they did that, I kind of think it's been revived. We have a better play about it now. And like, I am very interested in the history that God of Vengeance represents and that Indecent dramatizes. Like, any theater historian worth their salt will tell you that the history of theater is a history of riots, and theater history is written in riots. And I love the fact that the story of the riot, or the indecency trial, and the actual outrage that surrounded this production has now been told. But the story of a Polish brothel, that doesn't feel as urgent to me as it probably did back then. That's just my 2 cents.
Ryan, would it show up on one of your syllabuses?
If I was teaching like a Jewish theater class, for sure. Like, or wait, are you talking God of Vengeance or Indecent? Because these are two
either
separate
one.
plays.
I mean, like, if you're teaching just a Broadway theater history class.
Okay, well, if I was teaching a Jewish theater class, they would both be on the syllabus, I would say, because I think that, well, one, it's nice when you can put plays in dialogue with each other, and force the students to read one because they'll need to understand it to read the other. That's how you build engagement. If I was just doing like a general, say, American theater survey class, or obviously God of Vengeance you probably wouldn't count for that, or just general theater survey. I would probably sooner do Indecent than God of Vengeance, because you don't need to have read or seen God of Vengeance to understand Indecent. And if I only have room for one, I think the more recent is probably the better play.
Fair enough. Ashley,
I also just really like Paula Vogel's work, like, in general.
She's a wonderful writer. It's true.
You could do a whole course on her.
100%. Yeah, so to mirror Ryan's ripping the Band-Aid off, all theater is worth watching. I don't like the phrasing of the question, and I'll say it every time I'm on the show. Yes, I think it's 100% worth the watch. And there's nothing to be lost from this play. Like, I don't think anyone's going to watch Indecent and say, wow, I wish I had that hour and 47 minutes of my life back. Like, no, like, whether or not you're a changed person at the end of it, your mileage may vary, but it is a well-crafted and very mindfully produced piece of theater. I think everyone, both on and behind the stage, absolutely, has full weight and stake in the play itself and in the lore that kind of accompanies it. And Paula Vogel, and like, there's, again, it just comes back to that reverence for the original source text and for the story itself that I think is so cool. And as well, I mean, theater about theater has the tendency to not be great, and I think that Indecent actually navigates that really well, and that, yes, it's theater about theater, largely for an audience of theater people, but I didn't mind it. I think that it's still interesting and accessible to someone outside of that mold somehow. I don't know what the secret sauce is that really opens it up so well, but it's
Lemel.
I was going to say it's the Jews.
Yeah. Undopi.
It's interesting that you should say that, because I agree with you that theater about theater is often not very interesting, but I didn't really get the sense that this was necessarily done for an audience of largely theater people. Like, this felt very accessible to me for a theater show about theater. Like, I didn't get the sense that I mean, like, obviously it's a Broadway audience, like, you're going to get who you're going to get. But like, I do think that you could probably, like, I see this as a fairly wide reaching play. I don't think that necessarily I never really pictured that for the show.
The only reason I lean that way is because, like, in terms of genre, it's 100% a play with music and not a musical. I think if they had wanted to go the very commercial and very, overly saccharine and sentimental route, they could have made this a Broadway musical, no problem. One with a super catchy cast recording, and that goes the whole 9 yards with that, but they didn't. I think that it was really true to both the spirit of the culture that informed it and the spirit of the play that informed it as well. And so it feels like it's been produced exactly the way that the people who made it wanted it to be produced, rather than hey, this is how we can use this as a vehicle to make money, because that is not interesting theater. Interesting theater is what it wants to be, rather than what it's been told to be by someone in a production company somewhere.
I mean, I'll echo everybody's sentiment that fantastic production that's well worth the watch. I mean, as a history buff myself, I always love reading the books about the theater of making theater, whether it's a history of a play or a history of a musical. I mean, like, one of my favorite theater books is what is it called? I'm totally gapping on the name of it right now. Something Good. It's called Something Good, and it's the history charting the partnership of Rogers and Hammerstein in the creation of each of their musicals. Like, each section of the book is about what they were doing and just how the creation process worked for each of them. And it's a fantastic book, really great read for anybody who particularly is interested in the history of musical theater, reading about how these two kind of people started the whole American musical theater is a great book. So there's that book. Like, there's so many, Razzle Dazzle, the history of Broadway, and the Nederlanders and the Schuberts, and how they saved Broadway a number of times from absolute bankruptcy and destruction. Like, so many great books about theater making theater. I mean, even the show recently, Fosse Verdon, which was all about Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon and their creation process. Like, I would love to see more stories about theater making theater told, because there's so much that goes on in the rehearsal room and behind the scenes to make something really beautiful on stage. It's one of those great things. Like, I remember somebody saying, making a show is like watching a duck on water, where the audience sees the duck gliding across the water, but underneath it's the little pedaling feet that are really pushing this show forward. And that's what was great, because you got to see the pedaling feet for this play, because you got to see the history of this play and how it kind of came, like, rose and fell. So yeah, I mean, absolutely watch this piece, well worth it. I'm actually considering showing it to my family. Hooking up my Broadway HD account to the TV and saying, got a piece of theater for all of us to watch. So Yes, absolutely. I would totally 100% support Indecent being watched by one and all. So if you got a Broadway HD account, put this on your watch list because you will not be disappointed. There we go. All right, let's head into some more text-based questions. And so the first question is, what factor do you think had the greater significance in the cancellation of God of Vengeance on Broadway? Its depiction of lesbians or of Jews? Aisling, I'll let you lead this one.
It's such a subjective question. Genuinely, I feel like it's it perhaps could have gotten away with one or the other. So it could have been a play about Jews at the time, or it could have been a play that featured lesbians at the time. I think the fact that it's both is really what tipped that over the edge. I don't think that entire production team would have been arrested and convicted based on one or the other. But I think, again, like that meeting of two transgressive identities at the time really is what made that happen, which is really unfortunate because it's such a rich cross section of cultures. But yeah, I do think it's the both cop out answer. My apologies.
I love Ryan smirking because he led the writing of these questions. So the fact that you found such a moral dilemma in this, just watching Ryan's TA face light up at like, haha, my reading comprehension questions have stumped you. Well done, me. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree that it's both, but what I think is really interesting is the play seems to come down on the side, like the play Indecent comes down on the side that it's more so because of the Jews than the lesbianism, and that it's people like Rabbi Silverman who are the ones who are taking big objection to it, and that it's specifically the fact that it contains this very obscene depiction of two women in love was used as the pretext to shut the play down. But I think I wrote down a quote that the character of Eugene O'Neill says, and I think this is, if you ever want, the thesis of your play to be heard for the people in the back, have Eugene O'Neill say it. And he said, so quote, "They're going to claim that they're closing it because of homosexualis. That's bunk. They're closing it because the play shows that every religion, even Jews, sells God for a price." End quote. And I think that is what the Jewish community in the play is taking objection to, and like right from that very first reading that was going on in the salon where Lemel is introduced to theater for the first time. This is the discussion that is being had over and over, and I know we're going to get into the nuances of that discussion in particular, so I won't put the cart before the horse. But I think from at least Taichman and Vogel's perspective, it is more so kind of, the unfortunate fact that Jews are very good at gouging their own, is what it was, at least the final kind of cut that brought about the death of this play on Broadway. That said, it's not like people were completely cool with lesbians at the time either. So I kind of feel like the play, I kind of feel like Indecent, the play, oversimplifies that a bit and trying to say that it was more so the Jewish element. But yeah, I agree, Aisling. It's definitely the two together. I don't think that's a cop-out answer at all. I think that historically probably is pretty accurate.
Sorry, go ahead, Mackenzie.
Oh no, I'm just gonna piggyback off Ryan, but if you're gonna piggyback off Ryan, then you go first.
I am and I am also not. I wanted to say, on the one hand, like I agree to an extent that it's like, it is a very common thing in the Jewish community for sure for Jews to be preemptively offended almost by certain things that might be deemed anti-Semitic, not because necessarily, however you want to judge the offensiveness of something, but not because of how it affects us as individuals, but how a lot of Jews perceive that other people will perceive us. And so that is, I think that there for sure is something to that. And I both of you have said both things, and I sort of want to say like both things and also neither of them, because I think what it is, it's the play. Like, it's just the play, because the play inherently, because it has homosexuality in it, and because it's about Jews and written by a Jew in Yiddish originally, inherently goes against the white Christian culture that still dominates American society. Which is why I say still that we might be at a stage where God of Vengeance could be shown in its original text and not be thrown out of theaters. But like, I think that something that Indecent does very well, and something that God of Vengeance forced people to do is, or didn't force people to do, but now sort of in retrospect we can look and see that it's at the end of the day it's the fact that it's things that go against the mainstream, which is a country and a society founded upon white Christian beliefs. And things like, I mean, to its very foundation, you think about the good, the archetype that is sort of referenced here of like the good Catholic girl, right? Who then comes in to play Rivka of all people. Or like, like this girl that it's going to shock her parents. She's doing it because it's going to shock her parents that she's playing a Jew, right? Or that she's playing a lesbian, but both are going to equally shock them, right? It's not a question, I think, of pitting. It's a question of just difference. It's a question of that this is a play by and about difference, and that difference is frightening to people, and fear is, I think, more often than not on a public scale certainly translated into anger. And so that's why we see this outrage, is because people were very frightened by something that is A, very different, and B, very moving. And so I think that, this is a big thing that I like to explore in my work, is like the relationship between sex and humanity, right? Is very, because this Christian idealist culture has turned sex and virginity and purity into this whole thing, where in reality it's animals, right? It's this thing, and that I think is to a degree what Ash is. It's a complicated conversation, obviously, but to a degree, I think what Ash and what Vogel and Teichman are trying to say is, we all do these things. It's the most basic sort of form of that argument, but there's a certain me first quality, I think, to the society that America has built for a very, very long time, and a lot of people don't get to participate in that.
Yeah. Wax, well said. Like, damn. So well said. So hard following you.
Sorry. That's why I said you should go first.
Fair. I mean, Max and Ryan kind of alluded to where I'll go with my answer, but for me, I think the greater significance of the cancellation falls on the homosexuality and lesbian relationship of this play, and why it was canceled. Because back then, like, what is this, 1930, 1940 Broadway, if I remember correctly, timing-wise?
1932 is when it arrived
1932, okay. So, once again, who had the money to go see the show? It was going to be white Protestant Catholic audiences, upper middle class. That's who was going out to see the shows. Majority audience. And for them, homosexuality, that's a sin. Like, so right away, that's like, not that I don't personally believe this, but them, like, that to them, like, big deal. So the fact that you have a play about this, and the fact that you even cut the rain scene, which further illustrated, and really, as they say when they find out that those cuts have been made in the script, and Katrina Lenken's character goes, well, now you're really vilifying my character. You're making her into a, like, lesbian villain of the story. That's what you've done by taking up that rain scene. And the producer's like, well, the audience is, like, that's where the audience is. They they want to see they have to see lesbianism as evil. They can't see it as wholesome and an everyday piece of life. We have to vilify it. right? So that's the whole thing of this play, is that the minute somebody finds out about that there's a play like this, and it's very overt, like there's no subtext whatsoever, that it's like, this is what it is. It's no doubt to me that type of thing would get it shut down. I mean, they talk about like men in parks doing homosexual acts and things like that, and how they're getting arrested for it. And it's like, this was all still a big thing. So the fact you have a play being so overt about it doesn't surprise me in the least. And especially the fact that the church still has such power within the community.
But that's it, right? I want to get back to that. Put the
thumb on the scale to go and cancel, because any priest can get up on a Sunday and go, if you saw this play, it's blasphemy. Like,
but it was the rabbi who was saying that, not the priest.
Right, but I want to.
Religion itself was against it.
Like, but that's actually not entirely true, right? What Judaism, what the Jewish authorities were arguing against was the depiction of sex, not the depiction of homosexuality necessarily.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, and it's a very complicated. I'm sure if any religious, heads are watching this,
thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Pope Francis.
I might make people angry, but there's in the Old Testament, in the Torah, there's a great deal you can. Sex between men and men is one thing, and you can for sure read into that, but there is strong evidence for lesbian relationship in the Torah. I mean, Naomi and Ruth being the sort of penultimate or I don't know if that's the proper use of that word.
Quintessential?
The quintessential example. Or I mean, you can look at the character of Miriam in that and do a sort of read that character in that way as well. Character, person, historical figure. But that's what I sort of want to focus on, is who is it a sin to? Yeah. Right? It's a sin to the Catholic Church, to Christians.
Yeah.
It's, and so that's why I say that these things, that idea of, and once again, obviously Judaism and other religions have, virginity is an important thing. But I want to stress that the root of the sin of homosexuality is the church.
Yep.
And for those not familiar, Jews have not had the most wonderful relationship with the church. It's getting better. We're okay now. But, at that time, not great. So I think that, you just can't separate the two. And in that regard, it's a much bigger picture that we're talking about. What is acceptable by because the Pope was still, endorsing presidents and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And saying things about like Marilyn Monroe. And I mean, this is later, obviously, but commenting on like the Pope had a supreme, and still does, but had a supreme influence on culture. And religion had a supreme influence on culture, and Christianity did, right? And so that's why I really want to stress that it's still happening. Like, it's still, I mean, we want to talk about America. This happens, like, Canada is maybe even worse for this, because it's, we are a colonial power in a lot of ways. I mean, in all ways, we are a colonial power. And that, British colonial mindset still embeds itself in every root of our society, which is why it is so hard. I mean, Jews are one thing, any minority, to tell their own story that is different from that. And it's not anyone living's fault necessarily, but it's seeped in. And so it's really hard to escape from.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, the sin of sex itself is what a lot of religion goes against. So, Max, you hit it on the head there. But yeah, I think particularly for the Catholics in the audience.
Well, there's a great line that the character Esther says in the play, and I wrote it down again. Like, Among the intelligentsia, lesbians sell tickets. Uptown for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Prostitutes in a brothel is all the excitement they can take. And that line, even like in the recording, got applause from the audience. And I think that kind of sums up this in a nutshell.
And who's that audience too? Like who's making up a majority of that audience? Like Anglo-Saxon, white, Catholic, Protestant peoples. That's usually who it is. So, there we go. This is a big topic to unpack. So, Ryan, you've given us some great cannon fodder here. Well done to you. Okay, unless somebody has another piece they want to add to this question, Ashley, do you have something you want to add?
I would love to chime in just with one thing, just because I'm working on a new show right now based in New York that's around the same time as this, and I just think it's interesting. In 1929 as well, there was a big resurgence of homophobia in the Black church as well. So in Abyssinian Baptist Church, which was radiating out into the other Protestant churches in New York City at the time, Adam Clayton Powell Sr., right after the stock market crashed, did this really big sermon basically definitively saying gays are bad, absolutely not, no, no, no. Whereas before it might not have been said quite so explicitly. And the way that radiated into other Baptist churches, other Protestant churches, to agree with your point, Max, I think that it's separate from the Jews and the church, but I also think that that's kind of the soundtrack for the rest of the city that's happening behind this action in the play. I think that's I think that there's so much noise going on behind this play that's happening with God of Vengeance that it's just loud and chaotic and complicated, and there's so much happening that led to censorship, I think. That's all.
Woohoo! Well said. All right. So, once again, history, such a fascinating thing. Don't understand why not everybody's a history buff. There's so much you can get into with history. Either way. So let's go on to the next question then. So when the play arrives in America, the character of Rena was cut from the cast and was replaced by Virginia McFadden because of her accent. Schindelkraut, yeah.
Schilderkraut, yeah.
Schilderkraut, thank you.
But the flair on it was perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Schilderkraut. When people say Revkala, they've got to hear pure girl on stage. No shtetl, no girl off the boat. They've got to see their own American daughter. So, do imported plays need to be stripped of elements of their original culture when brought to a new city? Are things like language and accents obstacles to a successful touring? I want to start this one.
Go for it.
Yay. Okay, so for me, it's a mixed situation. Overall, I don't like when things are wildly adjusted to suit one particular audience, but on the other hand, I do get where it's I do get it from a business perspective. You got to sell to your audience, and ergo, your audience is who it is. I mean, I think this happens a lot more when shows are coming into American audiences versus the other way around. For example, when the musical Chess came from the West End to Broadway, they actually changed the book to make it that so the American wins in the end of the play and beats the Russian. That's how far they went in the story, was they were like, a Russian can't win, it's gotta be the American. So they really changed the whole second act of the play so the American would win. So,
and then cast Josh Groban to play him. No, he plays
That was much later. That was a few decades, and even then, that's a different version. I mean,
okay, I know. I'm just being silly.
Game.
Go on, man.
I know. But so, for me, I understand why they did it. Once again, business, Americans like seeing themselves win. That's part of their. Ashley, not to offend, because I know you come from outside Washington.
Fine.
But it's that thing of. We're the best in the world. We have to win. We want to see ourselves depicted on stage. Ergo, you got to change the script you got to change to reflect that. So, cutting an actor to replace him with another actor, I'm not totally against it, because if they're going for an audience and they're going for an uptown Broadway thing and they know they got to sell the show, sometimes you got to make those tough business choices versus an artistic choice. What I don't like is when what happened with Chess is where an entire story is changed. So what irks me more about the situation is not that Reina is cut, but that they totally make a whole bunch of cuts to the script and totally change the script to suit this upper, up city Broadway audience. That's what irks me more. Not so much her getting cut, because I go, business decision, you gotta put your cast together to sell the show.
Is the story not also a business decision, though? We don't think that this Gentile audience is going to like this explicit content, so we need to change it for business.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, that's why I said, like, if it's somebody you're like replacing an actor, that's one thing. It's when you're actually going in and literally changing the story of the script. It's almost like doing Fiddler on the Roof, but then totally changing the ending, or even like doing Oklahoma and changing the ending because we got to make it a happier ending.
Which a couple weeks ago we just decided might be better to change the ending of Oklahoma.
Right? But a producer may go, no, Americans, they want to see this classic show. We got to do it this way, no matter what. So that's where I don't like it. Is when things get changed to, like, the entire story gets changed. It's one thing to change an actor out because they need somebody else to fill the part. It's another thing to actually change the entire story that I don't like. Because now you're stripping something away from the actual story versus just changing an actor.
Okay, can I
change all the time? Max, I see you like gearing at the bit here.
So I've got a real nice painting back there, or a poster actually, I should say. It's Skull with Cigarette by Vincent van Gogh.
Nice.
What I would much rather have is the original Skull with Cigarette by Vincent van Gogh. Still pretty good. But I would much rather have the original. I think, and actually, I'm gonna cash in. Fuck no. You should not change a single thing about a production for a tour. If you don't want, if that's the original creator's choice, I mean, like, do you? But I think if a show is done right, you should be able to understand it. I can say from personal experience that is true. Yeah, I think that American audiences are a little bit soft and like things spoon-fed to them. So, yeah,
it's a KO.
That goes for that goes. No. I'm sorry. That goes for Canadian audiences as well. I'm sorry. I should say English-speaking audiences.
For sure.
Yeah,
that's my answer.
I will piggyback off. I'll piggyback off that. So. I see a bit of both sides on this one, because I don't personally have a problem with an American cast version of a show from overseas. I think, a very thick accent could actually impede, like, audience comprehension, and, like, just to throw some adaptation theory into the mix. In adaptation theory, there's this concept called, I'm sure many of you have heard some version of it, the spirit of the source. And it's the idea that, when you move something from one context to another, be that linguistic or medial or what have you, it's not enough to just, and this is where the fidelity argument goes wrong so often, it's not enough to just say, take exactly what it was and put it just in the new context. Is you kind of have to find the elements that are trying to be communicated or worth being communicated about the original, and then find the equivalence in the new context. So if the character of Rivkala has a very thick accent, that actually isn't recreating the experience of seeing the authentic version, because to a Yiddish-speaking audience seeing the play in Poland, that accent would be non-existent. This is just
You're right. And you know what? You're right. My, like, curmudgeonly guy.
You're allowed to be curmudgeony, Max. We love you for it.
Yeah. Because, like, my thing is saying, like, just do the play on Broadway in Yiddish. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, like, just don't do it in English. Like, why should they, Shalom Ash says, or maybe it was Eugene, one of the writers says, you're bearing a part of your soul on stage, and that's true of actors as well. And my thing is just like, if you're bearing a part of your soul to me, I speak your own language. Like, that's hard enough. Like, I don't need you to do me the favor of speaking my language. I'll get it. Like, If it's your soul, that's transcendent of.
Well, I think you're bringing up something that actually dovetails very nicely into what my second half of my point was going to be is, so while I completely understand the pragmatic dimension of why it is okay to switch up actors and have an American cast do this European production, as much as I agree with that, one of what I think is one of the most heartbreaking lines in the play is when Raina says that this will be the only role in my lifetime where I can tell someone that I love her on stage. And so with the phrasing of the question, which remember I phrased, I think it's a damnable shame that Raina gets cut from this role that means so much to her, even if I understand the reason why from a producing perspective.
It's not personal, Ryan. It's business.
Yeah,
That was a horrible Godfather accent. I apologize.
Right, but if it's business as well, I mean, there's no shortage of Yiddish-speaking audience members in the Lower East Side at the time.
They're going up to Broadway at this point. That's why she gets cut.
No, I get that, but that's kind of my question, right? It's like, I'm curious what the kind of cost-benefit analysis was of moving it up to Broadway, which you could walk from the Lower East Side to there in like an hour. Like if people who weren't from the Lower East Side wanted to go and see it, they could. So it's interesting.
Different worlds.
It is interesting because Lemel does also say that in Europe, if tickets cost $1, you know what I mean? Like anyone can walk in and see this show in its original form. It's not, there's not this class disparity between who gets to see what version of the show and what version of the show is acceptable for what class. You know what I mean?
100%. And just to your point, Mac, earlier, it's just like, I don't know if you've seen the 2007 movie musical Hairspray, but there's a line in it where Corny Collins says you wouldn't cut Corny Collins from the Corny Collins show. And I think that kind of philosophy of when you have a production like this where your actors are so integral to the core of the show, the emotional soul of the show, that you then have to have fidelity in the adapted version, to then take one of those components out just for ease of production, marketability, understanding. I think that it's a weak take. I think that there are ways to navigate accents and languages, be it through surtitles or just dealing with it. Like, it happens. Accents happen in life and we navigate them all the time. It's not hard. So, like, I don't know. I don't think it's a super defensible choice.
I mean, for me, like, the whole Corny Collins thing, I go more, that's more like, from an audience perspective, because the audience identifies with Corny Collins. So taking Corny Collins away from an audience is where you get the uproar, versus taking away, what's her name again? Raina, where the upper audience that's going to be paying for this, they have no connection to her. They won't care if she's cut.
But that's the thing, is how do they know, right?
She is. Exactly. Well, to us as the audience, we identify with Raina, but for an audience that's going to come to the Broadway opening night, who probably have never seen the Lower East Side in Yiddish, like, for them, it's like, you cut someone?
Right, but no, but that's my point, is why it's so destructive to cut. Like, even, I don't know, like, how much I should say on tape, honestly, but, like, even, and I'll say it, even casting someone like Scott Wentworth as Tevye, that's why something like that is so destructive, is because then audiences don't know who they connect with. They only have one option, right? They only have the white bread option. Well, a Stratford audience has never seen a Jewish Tevye.
Most Stratford audiences have seen Topol in the movie, I would wager.
Okay, sure, but it's a different medium, right? Like, I who knows if they've even seen him live, right? Topol did it live for like decades. I think.
Probably
you know what I mean? Like,
came to Toronto
right.
For a while.
That dude is so old. He's probably still doing it.
No, actually,
right?
I have a whole funny offline story about something I was supposed to see.
We've talked about Fiddler enough. Move on.
But my point is that we have the authentic version. We talk in theater so much about authenticity. That's actually, like, it's as authentic as you can get. Like, it's a Yiddish-speaking Jewish woman who is in love with another woman, right?
Right.
You're casting, Jane Doe, whoever from Alabama, like wherever. it's just like she might be a really wonderful actor, but if you don't give audiences, because once again, it has to be about the audience. If you don't give audiences the chance to see the authentic, version, if we choose to use that word, the authentic version of that character, you're doing them an incredible disservice. So that at that point, same deal now. Like, listen, like there have been, I can name you so many Canadian productions where the content has been Jewish and not a single Jewish actor has been cast. That, like, it is shocking because you don't give audiences the chance to see what they're missing, right? In what it means to have a person who knows that story telling that story. It's this conversation that we've been having for years about representation in theater for Black people, for Asian Canadian, for Aboriginal, for Indigenous Canadians, right? For Indigenous peoples. It's why those conversations are so important, because I do agree that actors should be allowed to expand their range and try different. But like, I'm not saying that Miss McFadden should not have been allowed to play that role. I'm just saying they should have given the Yiddish woman a chance, right? And that's, I think, what it comes down to. Yeah. The chance to fail, right? For audiences to say, no, I don't think we want that. You know what I mean?
So hearing this whole discussion, we are certainly applying a very presentist lens to this. We are speaking post-globalization, post-phenomenology as a framework for studying theater. Post-Holocaust, certainly, in terms of just America's relationship to the Jews. But that, I think, if they had let Raina do it, the opening night reviews, if they could get past the lesbianism, would just all be about couldn't understand a goddamn word this woman is saying. And the show would be canceled for a very different reason. But the audience at that time wouldn't have been willing to make the allowances that, like, we have disability theater as a whole genre now, where we are all for letting artists of different, like, cognitive and physical abilities show us what they can do. But that concept, and this is why I bring up phenomenology, would not have computed to a 1932 audience.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? Is we can say it might not have, but we'll just never know. Right? And that's the real tragedy of it, is that an actress lost the chance to play a role that she...
I agree. It's tragic. You know what I mean? That's why I did bring in my quote in particular of how much I feel for Raina for losing this. I think we are very much thinking of this in our 21st century perspective here.
I mean, for sure, but it's also, like, retrospectively, the extent to which productions were willing to settle for approximations of characters when you have the actual person there, like... Jane Doe could be an absolutely wonderful actor, and I don't say that she isn't, but she's an approximation. Why is that what you reach for when you have this other person in your arsenal who
why does Scarlett Johansson want to play a tree? Like,
that's a conversation for another day.
Perfect. This has just been a wonderful, I think this has been our most wonderful debated moment of any Cup episode right now.
And we're all kind of agreeing with each other in a way. We just we're all thinking on so many different levels of perspective, and we want to get them all in there all at once.
Okay. All right. Let's head into the final question, though, because I think it's going to be one that really unlocks a good debate here. Thank you, Ryan, for this. Early in the play, Shulman Ash responds to criticism of God of Vengeance by asking, why must every Jew on stage be a paragon? So then how can and/or should artists honestly depict marginalized groups in all their complexity without perpetuating negative stereotypes and vindicating their detractors? Max, I'll let you start this one.
I'd like the question is how should every Jew be a paragon on stage, and I'm in here wearing my Star of David sweater. It's a really complicated question because it's hard in these conversations to talk about. Because Jews are not a visible minority, it's a complicated question to have. Because certainly we're talking about Ashkenazi Jews here largely, and I want to be specific about that because Jews are not a white population. There are many different sort of different groups of Jewish people that go through North Africa and the Middle East and even China and India, and so it's very complicated, obviously. Now, for Ashkenazi Jews, it's been a different story because Ashkenazi Jews are white largely. We're Eastern European, and so the question is often raised. Can someone like Al Pacino play Shylock, right? Or can Meryl? I don't even know. Meryl Streep, I imagine, is not Jewish. Can Meryl Streep play the rabbi in Angels in America or something like that?
Or Sophie's Choice.
Or Sophie's Choice. Thank you. Yes. And I think that, when it comes to this complicated question of Ashkenazi Jews, who gets to tell our story, if it's a character in a play, and the fact that they're Jewish doesn't have anything necessarily to do with the play, that's one thing. But if it's a play about being Jewish, I think it should be told by Jews. And I might be unique in that opinion, but I am of the opinion that Jews should get the chance, the same way that many other minorities have, to tell our own story for ourselves. And I think that in America we have seen that to a large degree. That Fiddler on the Roof, bring it up again, the Yiddish production is a perfect example of that. I really say this about Canadian theater, because in Canadian theater it just has not happened as much. We get bits and pieces of it here and there, but certainly not in the mainstream like we have in America. And America is still not far from perfect in that. And, we get instances of Jew face all the time. But yeah, I think that the fact is, I can only speak as a Jew. I can't speak obviously as any other kind of minority. But if we ever get out from this deep-seated, entrenched, white Christian culture, minorities will always be a paragon on stage. There will never be a time when we're not. And I say we're not because I include Jews in that. A Jew will always be seen as a Jew first. And it's a sad truth. But Fiddler on the Roof will always be the Jewish play. Right? I mean, it just is. I just, it makes me depressed. But I think that so much harm has been done by this white Christian hierarchy that has rooted itself through centuries of oppression, that even if now we're coming out of it and saying, oh, we're sorry, and also obviously, as we've got to recognize privilege at various levels is a very complicated issue. But I just don't see a way for certainly Jews to ever be viewed as anything other than Jews on stage, and that's not always a bad thing. But I do think that our identity will often come first and foremost when writing plays about Jews. I don't think God of Vengeance will ever it just is not going to happen that God of Vengeance will ever be viewed the same as, I'm trying to think of a Goetia play that is comparable. There's not really one, but I mean, the one that was just turned into a movie with Doubt.
Yes.
Doubt, right?
That movie's
God of
10
Vengeance.
years old now. You realize?
Yeah, I know. It just turned into a movie.
Great play.
Great play, yeah. But that God of Vengeance will never be Doubt. It will always be the Jewish Doubt, right? And I just think that it makes me depressed, but I don't explicitly see a way around that. And I think the way around it is more people writing plays about their stories, because the fact is, and what I get so much from this play is that for Jews specifically, because we have no land, because our tradition is such an oral tradition, I know, okay, I'm sorry, that also might make a lot of people very angry, because we historically have not had a country that we can call our own. Now, we have for a very short period of time of our history, potentially, but because we're a nomadic people, because we have always been refugees, we are the pages that our story is written on. We bear the responsibility of those words. And no one else knows what it feels like to bear that responsibility. And so until that feeling is effectively communicated through like countless and countless and countless artists doing their best to unwrap that incredibly complex identity, it's going to be a rocky road.
Ryan, your facial expressions of this entire wonderful lecture that Max, you gave a beautiful answer to. Ryan, what are your thoughts? Because you've been giving us some really interesting expressions.
Well, Max, I will say, thank you for bringing in all of that and your very impassioned speech about this. And I'm not going to disagree or contradict anything you've said there. I'm kind of just also surprised you took a very different approach to this question than I was expecting. Well, certainly because, I feel like you're still bleeding over from the previous question about is Virginia McFadden a reasonable substitute for Raina, whereas this is a question about why must every Jew be a paragon begins at the level of the text all the way back to the salon where the first reading happens, where there's not a single goy in the room.
That's fair.
And
That's fair.
And the argument that happens there is you are going to make Jews look bad and fuel the flames of anti-Semitism by the way you have shown an ugly side of Jewish culture in this play. And this is something that I personally grapple with, in terms of, it's, the idea of the model minority and if you show an ugly side of a culture that already is being marginalized and discriminated against, and, a few years or decades after the play was originally written, but a few years after this Broadway production will be literally killed by the millions. It's a compelling argument, as much as we all get very, viscerally offended as artists and theater enthusiasts by the thought of the censorship that this play faced. We also kind of have to think, is there a reasonable argument to the fact that you don't want to vindicate the anti-Semites, and this goes to the detractors of any marginalized group in any kind of artistic depiction of some of its less favorable aspects. And this is something I've certainly grappled with in my own playwriting. I, for the longest time, have been wanting to write a play in which I grapple with my own relationship to Judaism, and I kind of just can't do it because there are ugly things that I wanted to depict. And the play, they say when will be the right time? It's not the right time now. When will be the right time? Rome is always burning. And
this is a very interesting thing, is because while I agree with you, and this is a very Jewish thing for sure, it's still letting the anti-Semites off a little bit easy, right? Because no matter what we depict on stage, the anti-Semites will still be anti-Semitic.
Yes.
Right? And so whether or not it makes Jews look bad doesn't matter, because the Holocaust still happened.
And it wasn't Shalom Ash's fault.
Exactly, right?
I would agree with that.
That's what I'm saying, is I think that argument, it's a very Jewish thing to say, don't do it, it's going to make us look bad, comes from years and years and years, millennia of oppression from, various peoples. But it's, I get, and this is not on your answer, I think it's a very smart answer, but I get tired of the sort of excuse of, okay, well, will it vindicate the anti-Semite? Because it doesn't matter. An anti-Semite is still an anti-Semite. You know what I mean? Regardless of a play. That person is still going to be anti-Semitic. It's not like someone is going to go watch God of Vengeance and be like, you know what? Fucking Jews, man. Like, you know what I'm saying?
But I
Like,
do think someone, not like an out and proud, like, anti-Semite, but someone who doesn't have much strong opinions about Judaism will see a play that casts them in a negative light, and that might begin to cement a new opinion.
That is totally valid. And yes, you're absolutely
I have great admiration for playwrights like Shalom Ash, and like Arnold Wesker is one of my favorite playwrights, and like he does this very well too, and like who are able to, you know, just grapple with this in this way and really show the warts and all depiction. But I do realize that it is a slippery slope, and I don't have a good answer to it, and that's why I haven't written that play yet. And it does require like digging into my own very kind of like complicated Jewish psychology, which, as I'm sure you can relate to, it's not something that's easy to unpack in general.
For sure.
Aisling.
Yeah. Following either of those feels tricky and incorrect somehow. The only thing that I feel like I can really say is that the play is done respectfully, and I think it doesn't make tropes where it doesn't need to, and I think that any time that the play is referencing either tropes or stereotypes, it's doing so in pursuit of its theme, in pursuit of the play's message, in a way that doesn't feel problematic to me, and please step in if I'm wrong at any point. But I feel like the creators of the play, again, like I just have to keep on coming back to this reverence for the original. I think that it almost feels like this play and the audience that they assumed they would have in terms of a contemporary New York audience, it almost feels like it's making amends for the run that God of Vengeance didn't get to have. So there's no perfect audience in a 2017, 2018 world, but we can assume that on the whole, audiences then were less anti-Semitic than they were when God of Vengeance was first happening. We hope, we assume.
You gotta hope, right?
We have to hope.
This play is a product of Trump's America, remember?
I don't know if it's true, man, but you gotta hope. Yeah.
Yeah, so like, I feel like with the shifted context, it's done carefully, respectfully, and with just this, respect is so at the foundation, I think of it, that it winds up working. Like, this is a bit of a minefield, so I'm being careful because I don't want to overstep, but in all, from my own perspective as a white, not especially Jewish person, like mildly on my mom's side, but we don't have to get into it. I think that no stereotypes come through that are unfounded in what the play is trying to communicate. And that is my take.
Oh boy.
Mac,
right.
The least Jewish person on this panel.
It's true. The white Catholic guy. So, for me, Ryan, when you wrote this question, my first thing that kind of came to mind was the debate about clean art, meaning like no struggle and just make everybody a paragon. And for me, I went, if you're going to write a story, first of all, make sure it's your story to tell. Right? Like, that's the first big thing that has to be done, is we get into stereotypes when somebody who doesn't know the history and the background of these characters, of a certain group of people, tries to tell a story. Like, that's where we run into a problem, first of all. Shakespeare was not Jewish. So what's he do? He goes out and writes Merchant of Venice. Like,
don't even get me started on that.
I
shit.
know,
That's
right?
so much fun. I'm off again.
Right? Once again, like, Shakespeare.
But he also writes one of the greatest monologues and puts it in the mouth of that Jew.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's so infuriating. It's such a great play.
So, but like, once again, it's making sure, first of all, whoever tells the story, it's their story to tell. And then when you're telling your story, make your characters human. Like, don't shy away from, like the minute you start censoring and trying to tiptoe around things and hide the truth. I forget who says it. I forget what movie or what play it's from, but there's the line about stop tiptoeing around the truth and let the truth have its day. Basically, like, show the world warts and all, because until you actually start showing the warts instead of painting over them, you're never going to move forward in things. And it's only through confronting some of the darker elements of whatever it is, whether it's doubt dealing with molestation, and the treatment of the way nuns and children and all that type of thing, like or other aspects of certain groups. Like until you actually start confronting it and talking about it, nothing gets done. You just become stagnant. And when you start making characters who are just ultra virtuistic and perfect, it becomes boring. I mean, why is it everybody says Superman and until kind of recently Captain America are boring characters? There's no struggle. There's no humanity to these people. Like that's what we like about these characters. It's when there is struggle and there's something you can actually, as a human being, sink your teeth into, because now you can relate across the spectrum. I mean, Ron, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring it up again. Fiddler on the Roof.
There it is.
Like,
well, it is a proud tradition.
It is a proud tradition, and on top of that, it was written by Jewish men with a director who was Jewish. Like, and so for them, they could tell
another Shalom, if I might add.
Yeah,
exactly. Shalom Aleichem. Exactly. So, like right there, that kind of goes to the point, or not goes to the point. It's just the fact that it was their story to tell. It was their history. Ergo, they could write characters who were morally complex characters who had struggles, who faced these challenges. Because I don't know if a Catholic person could have told the story of Fiddler on the Roof accordingly and dealt with the whole concept of traditions and what happens in that play with those characters. I mean, the fact they actually went to Hal Prince, who is not Jewish, and they said, "Would you like to direct it?" And he went, "No, not my story to tell. I don't get it." Big kudos to him for that. But like, that's the thing, is as long as you have the right people behind the story who can tell it authentically and honestly, then you can address some of the darker aspects of any type of group. It's when it's done by somebody who doesn't know the history and doesn't know how to address it, and then they revert to falling on a stereotype to do something. Then that's where the problem comes in. So my biggest thing is tell the story, because that's what makes good, interesting art. But it has to be the right people telling that story. Like, for example, I can never tell a story from the indigenous perspective about the schools, residential schools. Thank you. Like, that is not my story to tell. Like, as much as I find that topic immensely interesting, I read books on it. It's a fascinating topic to me about that type of history in Canada. That the person who should tell that story is someone from the indigenous culture, right? Like, I'd happily work with someone and consult with someone and work with them. Like, I don't think I don't mind consulting work and being able to sit down. Like, that's why I think some of these older texts that maybe originally weren't didn't have consultation should have consultation now. Like, that's what I liked about the recent revival of West Side Story they did on Broadway. Not the most recent one where they did some really weird camera work.
Oh yeah, I heard about that one. Wasn't
that
Van Hove? That looked crazy.
Yeah.
I'm
talking about the one before that, where they actually went back and they turned all the shark scenes Spanish, and actually had the sharks sing in Spanish. And they actually went to Lin-Manuel Miranda and a bunch of other people to get it authentically correct. And that's something this new film version with Spielberg. Apparently, there will be stuff in Spanish. I don't know.
Fun fact about West Side Story, it was actually originally called East Side Story
between Catholics and Jews. Yes,
that's right.
So for me, I go address all aspects of humanity, but just make sure it's your story to tell. That's basically what it boils down to.
There is a point that I wanted to go back to about the play that we're actually here talking about, if that's okay.
Yes.
Sorry. With regards to Indecent, there was something that you said, Max, that I just thought was interesting. In terms of like, if an anti-Semitic person is in the audience and like this isn't the play that's going to sway them either way, because inherently, like, no Jewish play can sway someone one way or the other because of the problems in society for millennia. Hundo P. But it's also, I am curious as to whether or not the diet anti-Semite is going to be seeing this play in the first place as well. Like, at that point, I'm curious as to whether or not plays need to play all sides of the audience with regards to how how they might feel about Jews, or just kind of accept that those people likely aren't coming to see it in the first place, and that level of persuasion doesn't even necessarily need to be brought into the conversation.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think it's a great point. I think what I would probably say to it, also as a playwright and a director, is that I'm going to write the play. I'm going to put on the play. I'm going to hope that if that person comes to it, it's going to be a positive experience for them, the way it will be for the entire audience. But I'm not going to assume that person is going to come.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I totally agree with you. And I do, like, it's hard, right? Because we do, as artists, I think we should be trying to reach as wide an audience as possible. That's obviously the goal. But you're absolutely right. I think it's a really, it's about who you want to sell your work to, right? And I think that is ultimately what the conversation is about in Indecent, is who are we trying to sell this work to? And the fact is that likely at that time, a lot of those people were diet anti-Semites or legit anti-Semites. You know what I mean? Like, it was certainly more normalized in mainstream culture then, and it's a little bit more hidden and insidious now, I think. But yeah, I totally see what you're saying. I think it's a very good point.
Well, I don't know if there's much more to say for anybody, but I think this is the end of this wonderful, deep review. Thank you, everybody, for joining this panel today. Bravo to all of you for bringing such great, well-thought-out answers. So now we're going to do the classic kind of sign-offs. Ashlyn, we'll start with you. Where can people find you and your work if they want to follow you?
Yes, I have a website at ashlingmurphy.ca. I also have an Instagram at ALY_Murph. And I'm pretty easily findable via different social medias. You can find me. We'll chat.
Very good, very good. Max, where can everybody follow you and your wonderful theater company?
For me personally, my Instagram is mackerman12, MACKERMAN 12. And you can reach Dandelion Theater on Facebook, Dandelion Theater on Twitter, Dandelion Theater, I think, DNDY Theater, and then on Instagram, Dandelion Theater TO. We've got a really big project coming up that we've been working really hard on. It's a bit of a surprise. I don't want to spoil it for the social media people that have been working very hard on our teasers and everything, but there's big announcements on those coming soon, so make sure to check in there. And as always, Black Lives Matter, support local theaters, donate if you can, and
well done. Ryan, give us your classic sign-off.
Yeah, I'm not very social media active, so just send all that love to Cup of Hemlock instead. And obviously seconding all the Black Lives Matter, justice for Breonna Taylor, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Well, for me, you can follow me at all social media platforms at Mackenzie Horner. You can also follow my podcast, Before the Downbeat. We wrap season 2. We're going to be releasing season 3 at the start of December. You actually can hear us do a whole 2-hour discussion about Fiddler on the Roof as our season 2 premiere episode.
Haven't they had enough, Mac?
No.
If they've made it to this point in the episode.
Never. But yes, you can listen to that as well at Before the Downbeat. Also, if you are listening to Before the Downbeat already, and you also follow us here, you can always do our season 2 feedback survey. And you can even win a prize, so there you go. Be sure to check that out as well. But for now, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time we raise a glass to all of you, have a great week. Stay healthy. Stay safe.
L'chaim.
Thank you.
L'chaim.